Welcome to Fog Street Mysteries, where every story begins in shadows and every clue glows under a single street lamp. Here, classic noir meets modern storytelling, filled with sharp detectives, haunted secrets, impossible crimes, and twists waiting at every corner. If you love fog-soaked alleys, tense interrogations, and the electric thrill of unraveling a mystery, you're in the right place. Step inside, the next case is already waiting. Don't forget to share thoughts. Your feedback keeps the mystery alive. Now let's begin. Nero Wolfe and the Train Without a Killer, a cinematic noir detective mystery, Nero Wolfe style. Chapter 1, The Client Who Arrived Breathless. If there's one thing I've learned working for Nero Wolfe, it's that trouble rarely knocks. It bursts, usually through the front door, unannounced, uninvited, and inconveniently timed between one of Wolfe's sacred rituals. This particular specimen of trouble arrived at 10:58 a.m., which put her smack dab in the middle of Wolfe's orchid hour. If that doesn't sound like a capital offense, you don't know Wolfe. I was at my desk in the office, trying to convince the monthly accounts to behave like civilized numbers, when the front door slammed open hard enough to rattle the hat rack. Light, quick footsteps followed, woman's, youngish, brisk but terrified, and a voice trembled, Is Mr. Nero Wolfe here? I leaned back in my chair. She was in her early 30s, though panic had tacked on a few extra years around the eyes. Her coat hung open, neither stylish nor cheap, just the kind you buy when you expect more weather than life ever promises. Her gloves were mismatched, which told me she'd dressed in a hurry. And the way she clutched her handbag, like a small drowning creature, put the rest of the picture together. Mr. Wolfe, I said, is upstairs communing with orchids. If you interrupt him, you'll die faster than anything you're here to report. I'm Archie Goodwin. Start with me. She swallowed hard. I was told he's the only man who can help me. People say that a lot. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they just want to believe it. She took a shaky step forward. My name is Clara Doyle. I need help, desperately. It's about my brother. Murder? I asked, because experience has taught me that asking saves time. Her breath caught. Yes. He was killed. Only no one believes it. They say it was an accident. They're wrong. They're all wrong. I kept my face straight, though the odds of any accident staying that way around Wolfe were slim. Sit down, Miss Doyle. She sat, but her fingers drummed on the handbag like they wanted escape. My brother, Samuel, died on the Northeastern Limited, overnight from Washington to New York. The conductor found him early yesterday morning. They said he'd had a heart attack. That's a disappointing opening for a murder tale, I observed. Her eyes flashed. You don't understand. Sam was healthy. No heart condition. And there was something strange about the compartment. Strange how? She hesitated. That's always a good sign. The truth never hesitates, panic does. There was no one else in the compartment, she said. The door had been locked from the inside. No sign of struggle. No weapon. But Sam, he looked afraid. As if he'd seen something. Or someone. That perked my ears. A locked room always plays nice with Wolfe's appetite for puzzles, if you could get him to listen long enough to notice. Before I could pull more out of her, my watch hit 11. Right on cue, the elevator groaned into motion upstairs, and Wolfe descended at his usual unhurried, mountainous pace. Orchids make him calm, but not forgiving. He entered the office with the air of a man returning to a world distinctly inferior to the one he'd just left. His glance landed on the woman, then on me, in an expression that combined reproach, weariness, and the resigned expectation that I'd explain myself. Good morning, sir, I said. This is Clara Doyle. She's come because her brother died on a train. The police say accident. She says murder. Wolfe exhaled. Confound it, Archie. Must complications seed themselves in my morning like dandelions? I ignored that. Miss Doyle half rose. Mr. Wolfe, please. My brother didn't just die. He was killed. And no one will admit it. They won't even investigate. Wolfe slid into his chair, his throne, if you like, and steepled his fingers. If the police are content, why should I be otherwise? Because, she said, voice cracking, there was no one in the compartment who could have done it. But he was murdered. I know it. That earned her a flicker, just a flicker, of Wolfe's interest. I cut in. She says the room was locked from the inside. No weapon, no assailant, no struggle. Yet she's certain foul play was involved. Wolfe glared at me as if I'd personally invited the mystery to tea. Miss Doyle, persuasion must consist of substance rather than emotion. Why do you believe your brother's death unnatural? She fumbled in her bag, producing a folded piece of paper and a small, silver timetable book. This, she said, handing me the paper, was found in his pocket. It's not his handwriting. I handed it to Wolfe. The note read. He shouldn't have taken the train. No signature. No explanation. Just the kind of dramatic creepiness killers like to leave if they want headlines. Wolfe grunted. That was progress. When Wolfe grunts, the world shifts a millimeter. And the timetable, he asked. She hesitated again. A page was missing. The one listing the departure times for the night we traveled. Her voice wavered. Sam had been nervous all week. Said someone was following him. But he wouldn't tell me who. Or why. Wolfe leaned back, eyes closed, fingers tented. For him, that's as close as dancing. At last he opened his eyes. Your circumstances intrigue, Miss Doyle, but intrigue alone does not compel action. I do not wander. I do not traipse after phantoms. I detest trains. And I deplore unnecessary exertion. Translation, the fee had better be good. She reached into her bag again, this time producing an envelope thick enough to interest even a man with Wolfe's immovable principles. I can pay whatever is necessary. My brother worked for the Hollingsworth Research Group. He'd discovered something valuable. I think that's why he was killed. So now we had a mysterious death, a locked compartment, a missing timetable page, a creepy anonymous note, and a research scientist with possibly dangerous secrets. That'll usually get Wolfe moving, if anything can. I gave Wolfe a look that said, come on, you big lummox, take the bait. He responded with a look that said, Archie, shut up. After a long minute, Wolfe sighed, heavy as a verdict. Very well. I will consider your case. Miss Doyle exhaled like she'd been underwater. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Wolfe raised a hand. Do not thank me prematurely. Archie will gather the preliminary facts. You will leave all materials with him. I will deliberate. She stood to leave. When the door closed behind her, Wolfe fixed his gaze on me. Archie. Confound you. What did I do? You baited me. Sure, I said. But you always bite. He glowered, but only mildly. A man dies in a locked train compartment, no agent present, no physical assault. Pfui. It is either an illusion or an imbecility. Or a puzzle. He grunted again. Get your coat. You will go to Penn Station and begin inquiry. I will remain here. Of course you will, I said. Heaven forbid you should step foot inside a passenger car. He closed his eyes, signaling official dismissal. Archie. Yes, sir. Do not enjoy this. I grinned. I'll try my best. I didn't. The truth was, I enjoyed it already. A train without a killer. That was a case even Nero Wolfe couldn't resist, though he'd die before admitting it. Chapter 2, the impossible compartment. If you're going to poke around a corpse's last known address, a train station is as good a place as any. There's something about those long, echoing platforms and the smell of oil and cold steel that makes you feel like anything could happen, most of it not in your favor. I caught a cab on West 35th, gave the driver Penn Station, and leaned back. Midtown had that late morning feel, trucks grumbling, horns complaining, pedestrians hustling their way to jobs they didn't like for bosses they didn't respect. New York was in excellent form. The cab dropped me at the curb, and I went down into the station, into a world of ticket windows, loudspeakers, and people who weren't paying attention to anything unless it involved movement or delay. If Death wanted anonymity, he couldn't do better than Penn Station. First stop was the ticket office. I flashed one of our printed cards, the kind that says, Nero Wolfe, Private Investigations, without apologizing for it, and aimed it at the clerk behind the glass. He was thin, balding, and had the resigned expression of a man who'd been blamed personally for every late train since the dawn of steam. "Morning," I said. "I'm looking into a death on the Northeastern Limited, arrived yesterday. Man named Samuel Doyle." The clerk's eyes sharpened behind his glasses. "You with the police?" "We're the civilian branch," I said. "We don't carry guns, we carry vocabulary." He snorted, which I took as appreciation. "I heard about that. Conductor said they found him in his berth, stiff as regulation paperwork." "Heart," they said. "Yeah, the heart's taking the fall," I agreed. "Who was the conductor?" "Williams. Car 3. Day off today, but Porter Rankin is on duty. He was on that run." "Where can I find Rankin?" He pointed. "End of the concourse, near track 12. Red cap with a mustache like he's hiding something." That sounded promising. I thanked him and headed in the indicated direction. Porter Rankin was easy to spot, dark-skinned, solid shoulders, immaculate uniform, and a mustache that looked like it could pass inspection on parade. He was helping a woman wrestle 2 suitcases that had no business going anywhere, then he turned, saw me coming with purpose, and braced himself. "Porter Rankin?" I asked. "Yes, sir." I showed him the card. "Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. I understand you were on the Northeastern Limited when Samuel Doyle died." His eyes flicked down to the card, then up again. "Yes, sir. I was working car 3. That was, unfortunate." "Yeah, that's one way to put it. I'd like to hear everything you remember. Start with when you last saw him alive." Rankin shifted his weight, thinking. "He boarded in Washington. Alone. No luggage except one small suitcase and a briefcase. Quiet man. Kept to himself. I showed him to his compartment around 9. See anyone else pay him special attention?" "No, sir. Just like any other passenger." He looked a little nervous, maybe, but some people don't like trains. "Some people don't like detectives either," I said. "We still exist." "After you settled him in, what then?" "I made rounds. Checked tickets, answered calls. Around midnight I passed his compartment. Light was off, shade down. Nothing unusual. The next time I saw him was early morning, when the conductor had me open the door from the outside. That pricked my ears. From the outside? I was told the door was locked from inside. It was, Rankin said. But we have a master key. Safety reasons. We opened it when he didn't respond to the conductor's knock. And he was dead. Yes, sir. Lying in the berth. On his back. Eyes open. He shivered slightly, the first crack in his professional composure. "I don't like seeing the dead, Mr. Goodwin. Not like that. Most of us don't. Except coroners and certain types of authors. You notice anything odd about the compartment? Anything at all?" He hesitated. His gaze drifted away and back, like he was weighing how much to share. That's a look I know well, it usually has money or fear behind it. There was a smell, he said finally. Faint. Not the usual smoke or perfume. Like a chemical. Sweet, but wrong. I thought maybe cleaning supplies, but the car had already been cleaned before departure. There was no cleaning during the night? I asked. No, sir. Not in the compartments. Only before the journey. Did you mention the smell to anyone? He nodded, reluctantly. I told the conductor. He said I was imagining things, and to keep quiet so passengers wouldn't fuss. Compliant fellow, I said. Okay, Rankin. You've been helpful. Now I need to see the compartment. He straightened. I don't know if. Look, I cut in. A man died on your train. Maybe from natural causes, maybe not. I'm not here to hang it on you. I just want to see where he spent his last hours. That's all. He studied my face, then slowly nodded. The car's in siding. They haven't assigned it yet. Come with me. We passed down through a quieter part of the station, where the noise thinned and the air got heavier. Rankin led me to a side platform where a line of cars sat idle, like they were having a smoke between runs. The Northeastern Limited's Car 3 was in the middle. Inside, the car had that stale, closed-in smell that public spaces develop when the public is absent. The carpeting showed a few scuffs but was otherwise respectable. Rankin led me halfway down the corridor and stopped at a narrow door. This was his compartment, he said. He fished out a ring of keys, found the right one with the ease of practice, and opened the door. It was small, as these things go. Wolfe would have taken one look and dropped dead on principle. There was the lower berth, neatly made except for the impression where a body had once lain, an upper berth folded away, a narrow window with its shade pulled halfway. A tiny fold-out table, a built-in seat, a metal rack for luggage. If you wanted luxury, you'd have to bring it yourself. I stepped inside and inhaled. The air was flat, but under it, if you worked for it, there was a suggestion of something, like overripe fruit that had been removed in a hurry. It was faint enough that I couldn't bet $1 on it, let alone Wolfe's fee, but it was there. Rankin watched me. You smell it? Maybe, I said. Did the police search this compartment? Yes, sir. They came aboard at arrival. Checked his things. Took his briefcase. Asked some questions. They were satisfied it was his heart. Of course they were, I said. The heart never talks back. I checked the lock. It was the standard turn latch from inside, with a keyhole on the corridor side. No visible tampering. The window latch was intact, the glass steady. Anyone could walk this corridor at night? I asked. Yes, sir. Passengers, crew. But most stay in their compartments. I nodded and began going over the place more carefully. No sense of a struggle, no scuff marks, no torn fabric, nothing out of place. The luggage rack was empty. Where was his suitcase? I asked. Police took it, Rankin said. They said it was routine. Routine is such a comforting word, I murmured. On the tiny fold-out table lay a fresh timetable booklet, exactly the kind Clara had given us, with one difference. I flipped it open and saw the same neat typography, the same lists of departures and arrivals. But when I got to the page for the Washington, New York overnight schedule, it was intact. No missing page. I turned it over, checked the binding. No signs of tearing or trimming. This copy hadn't been altered. Who put this here? I asked. It's standard, Rankin said. We leave one in each compartment. When was this one placed? Before departure. And no one's touched it since. I asked. Not that I know of, sir. That was a problem. Clara's book had a missing page. This one didn't. If Sam had carried his copy with the missing page, why was this one still here, untouched? Wolfe would say I was making assumptions. He'd be right. I hate it when he's right from across town. I pocketed a mental note of the timetable and checked the tiny shelf above the seat. A faint smudge on the wood caught my eye, darker than the rest of the varnish, circular, like a ring from a bottle or small container. It might have been nothing. It might not. Rankin, I said, was Mr. Doyle traveling with any medicine? Pills, inhalers, bottles, anything like that? Not that I saw, he said. He didn't ask for water or help. He just asked what time we'd be in New York and if the car doors were locked at night. Were they? He swallowed. They're latched between cars, but not locked. Emergency reasons. So anyone could move from car to car, if they felt like a stroll. I took one last look around. If there was a smoking gun here, it had been replaced with a faint, sweet smell and a timetable in perfect health. Back in the corridor, I turned to Rankin. One more question. You said Mr. Doyle was nervous. Nervous how? He kept checking his watch, Rankin said. Asked about the schedule, whether we were on time. Checked the corridor a couple of times, opened his door, looked out, closed it again. Like he expected someone specific, but they never came. Or they came sooner than he expected, I said. On my way out of the station, I found a payphone and called the brownstone. Fritz answered, because Fritz always answers faster than the phone rings. Wolfe, I said, in the office? He is, Archie. Shall I? Yeah. A moment later Wolfe's voice came on, edged with annoyance and digestion. Well? I've been touring the late Samuel Doyle's last bedroom. One locked compartment, no sign of forced entry, no signs of struggle, and a smell that doesn't belong. Oh, and a timetable that doesn't match his sister's. Plus a porter who's either very truthful or very rehearsed. Pfui. Be coherent. So I gave him the details, the master key, the lack of disorder, the faint chemical scent, the ring-shaped stain on the shelf, the intact timetable here versus the mutilated one Clara had shown us. When I finished, there was a silence thick enough to bottle and sell as gravy. At first blush, Wolfe said finally, it might be as advertised, a natural death in an enclosed space. But the note you brought me, and now this disparity of timetables, suggest an agency. The smell indicates a possible reagent. Poison? I asked. Archie, must you always be crude? There are innumerable substances that could induce failure of a vital organ without leaving obvious marks. The question is not what, but who and how. And why, I added. And why, he conceded. Come back. We must canvass the man's life before we chase ghosts along the tracks. I hung up, stepped back into the street, and inhaled Manhattan, exhaust, distant coffee, wet pavement, and the subtle note of something else in the air, trouble. A train compartment with no killer inside, no struggle, no weapon, and a dead man with fear in his eyes. If you think that sounds impossible, you're in good company. Nero Wolfe thought so too. And that, as they say, was when things really began. Chapter 3, Wolfe takes a ride, against his will. If you ever want to experience true human suffering, not the cheap kind you read about in melodramatic novels, but the genuine article, try persuading Nero Wolfe to leave his brownstone. You'd have better luck convincing the United Nations to hold a peace conference at a shooting range. But that was precisely the task before me, get the great, sedentary, immovable Nero Wolfe onto a train. A moving train. A thing that rattles, sways, vibrates, and serves food Wolfe wouldn't touch with a sterilized pitchfork. The idea alone was enough to shorten the life expectancy of every orchid in the plant rooms. It happened like this. I'd returned from Penn Station with my notes and a hunger for Fritz's veal cutlets. Wolfe, after giving the notes the kind of frown he usually reserves for boiled potatoes, announced that they were inadequate. Inadequate? I repeated. I nearly sprained a nostril sniffing that chemical smell. You did not identify it, Wolfe said. You merely confirmed its existence. A perfunctory accomplishment. You want me to go smell it again? I want context, Archie. Wolfe leaned back, sloshing around the beer he'd been nurturing like it was his only friend. This was an event aboard a moving conveyance. A train is a world unto itself. Its rhythms, its noises, the behavior of its passengers, all must be understood. And I cannot understand them from here. I blinked. Sir, are you suggesting? No, he snapped. I am not suggesting. I am stating that to reconstruct events, one must observe the conditions. Therefore, his eyes tightened, as if reading from a contract he had been tricked into signing. I will take the next Northeastern Limited. I leaned back in my chair and let out a low whistle. You. On a train? With people? And windows that don't open wide enough to let your ego pass through? Archie, he growled, stop braying. So that's how Nero Wolfe, the man who treats travel the way most people treat contagious diseases, found himself boarding the Northeastern Limited that night with me carrying his oversized suitcase and his oversized attitude. The train ride Wolfe will never forgive the universe for. Penn Station at night is a different creature from its daytime sibling. The shadows stretch longer, the footsteps echo sharper, and everyone looks like they're either running from something or towards something. Wolfe waddled through it like a man touring a sewer with a handkerchief pressed to his nose. Confound it, he muttered as a gust of station air hit us, the malodor is intolerable. That's New York, sir. Oh to everything. We boarded the train. The conductor, a skinny fellow with the nervous energy of a man who hasn't slept since Roosevelt's first term, recognized Wolfe from a description he must have gotten from his porter friend. He tried to offer help, but one glare from Wolfe made him reconsider his entire job description. Our compartment was exactly the size I expected, adequate for one normal human, criminally tight for Wolfe. He filled the berth area like a large, irritated deity who had been stuffed inside a holy shoebox. Archie, he said, this is barbarism. Wait until we start moving. When the train lurched forward, Wolfe's expression sagged like a soufflé collapsing. He braced himself with both hands, eyes narrowed in existential protest. Outside, the lights of the city blurred into streaks. Inside, Wolfe grimaced at every shudder, every tilt. But by some miracle, or Fritz pre-packing his nerves, Wolfe composed himself after a few minutes. Proceed, he ordered. Observe the passengers. Suspect number 1, the businessman who sweats guilt. I stepped into the corridor and began the evening rounds. Car 3 had a respectable list of characters, all of whom had shared the rails with the late Mr. Doyle the night he took his final trip. The first was a businessman with a suit that cost more than my monthly salary, and a forehead glistening with what I would generously call anxiety. Evening, I said as I approached him near the water station. He jumped slightly. Yes. Can I help you? Maybe. I'm looking into the death of a fellow passenger on your last run. Samuel Doyle. His eyes darted side to side. Oh. Unfortunate. Very unfortunate. I didn't know him. You looked like a man who has plenty of free nerves to spare, I said. Did you notice him acting odd? No, he said immediately, too immediately. I was working the whole trip. Reports. Numbers. Important deadlines. I took stock of him, trembling fingers, perspiration, a briefcase clutched like a life preserver. Where'd you work before boarding? I asked. I don't recall. Anyone who doesn't recall where they worked 10 hours earlier is either hiding something or has been struck on the head very recently. He didn't have the bruise. I filed him under possible liar, probable irritant, and moved along. Suspect number 2, the newlywed with shaky alibis. Further down the corridor, a young woman in an elegant traveling dress hovered near her compartment door. She was fidgeting with her wedding ring like it had personal opinions about her. "Mrs. Carlton?" I asked, checking my list. She nodded quickly. "Yes." "Is something wrong?" "No," I said. "Just routine questions. You were in car 3 on the night Mr. Doyle died." Her eyes softened with sympathy. "Such a tragedy. Though I didn't see anything. My husband and I retired early." "Your porter said he saw you out in the corridor once around midnight," I said. She froze. Only for half a second, but enough for my inner alarm bell to ding. "Oh, well, yes. I couldn't sleep. My husband snores." That, at least, sounded plausible. I only stepped out for a moment. "See anyone else out at that time?" "No. No one." There was something else, her perfume. Floral, expensive, but with a strange undertone, as if she'd tried to wash something off her wrists and hadn't quite succeeded. Wolfe would have an opinion about that. Probably insulting. Suspect number 3, the professor with the precise watch. Last on my list was Professor Emile Darrow, a man whose suit looked like it was pressed by angels and whose watch chain probably had more mileage than the train itself. He was seated by the window, jotting notes in a small ledger. "Professor Darrow," I said, sliding into the seat opposite him. "Mr. Goodwin," he said without looking up. "I wondered when you'd arrive." That was unexpected. "You've been expecting a detective?" He adjusted his spectacles. "A man dies in a locked compartment without struggle. The police are efficient but unimaginative. Someone was bound to inquire further. That pegged him as the dangerous type, intelligent, observant, and proud of both." "Did you speak to Mr. Doyle on that trip?" "No. But I observed him. He checked his watch repeatedly and seemed, how shall I say, timid." "Timid how?" He tapped his ledger. "He asked the porter twice whether we were on schedule. He seemed overly concerned with precise timing. A man worried about time is a man worried about something else. Wolfe would love him. Or strangle him. Possibly both. Wolfe renders judgment on humanity." Back in our compartment, Wolfe was sagging in the berth like a partially melted glacier. "Archie," he groaned, "the motion of this contraption is an affront to locomotion itself." "You mean you're carsick," I said cheerfully. "Do not mock me." I relayed what I'd gathered: businessman sweat stain, newlywed nervous, and professor chronometer. Wolfe listened, his eyes half closed, filtering each detail through whatever labyrinth counts as his mind. "The professor is perceptive," he said. "The businessman is hiding something. And the young woman's timeline contradicts the porter's. They all bear watching. You think one of them killed Doyle?" "Archie," he said, "I think nothing until facts force thought upon me. But each of these individuals exhibits behavior incongruous with their circumstances." He shifted uncomfortably as the train lurched. "This ride is intolerable. Yet necessary. We must analyze the environment. Smells, sounds." He sniffed the air and grimaced. "This car carries faint residues. Not merely disinfectant." "You smell it too?" I asked. "Yes. The same sweet odor you described. It lingers even now, days later." I felt a small thrill. Wolfe admitting I was right was as rare as July snow. "But," he added, "it tells us nothing certain yet." Outside, the train hummed through the darkness, carrying suspects, secrets, and one very indignant genius. I leaned back and watched Wolfe struggle not to topple sideways with the sway of the train. It wasn't dignified, but then again, dignity rarely solved murders. This case, however, just might require the world's least enthusiastic traveler. And I had the feeling that the Northeastern Limited had more to show us before the night was done. Chapter 4, A Death with No Hand. If Nero Wolfe has a favorite expression, aside from "pfui," it's "Archie, stop floundering." He uses it whenever I've done the exact opposite of floundering, which is often. The morning after our historic train misadventure, he hit me with a fresh installment. He was in the office, freshly installed in the red leather chair like a monarch who'd been carved into it at birth. Fritz had just brought him a glass of beer, which Wolfe held as reverently as a priest holds incense. "You will report," he commanded. I paced around the office, stretching muscles that had been abused by train berths, rattling rails, and one irritated genius. "All right." Businessman sweaty, guilty of something, not sure what. Newlywed nervous, jumpy, inconsistent, and wearing perfume that could stun livestock. Professor chronometer, sharper than a scalpel and twice as smug. All three were awake at suspicious hours, all three lie for sport, and none of them likes being questioned. Wolfe sipped. A mediocre summary. "Sure," I said. "Let me rewrite their psychological biographies in iambic pentameter." His eyelids lowered to half-mast. "That's Wolfe 4, shut up but don't stop." I dropped into my desk chair. "I don't suppose you developed any miraculous theory during the night." "I do not subscribe to miracles," Wolfe said. "But I have developed a conclusion drawn from the chemical odor we both observed on the train." I perked up. Wolfe doesn't develop conclusions lightly. "Yeah. It was not cleaning solution," Wolfe said. "Nor perfume, nor foodstuffs, nor disinfectant. It was a reagent." "You've said that before." "And I repeat it," he said sharply, "because you have not grasped its significance. If a reagent was present without visible residue, it suggests a dispersal method that left no trace. A timed dispersal. Meaning." He glared. "Archie. Must I spoon-feed you? A mechanism. A device. Something capable of releasing a substance when the victim was alone." That made the back of my neck itch. "Poison gas." "Do not leap," he said. "Aerosols, vapors, even volatile liquids can dissipate without marks. The point is, the victim may have been killed by something that did not require a human assailant present in the room." "No killer in the compartment," I said softly. "Just like Clara said." "Yes." Wolfe leaned forward, slightly, mind you, not enough to break a sweat. "But for such a mechanism to operate, someone had to construct it, calibrate it, plant it, and predict Doyle's behavior with precision." "Sounds like Professor Darrow's department," I muttered. "Perhaps. But we must learn more about Doyle himself, his work, his associates, his enemies." I stood. "Then I guess it's my cue to hit the pavement." Wolfe nodded. "You will. Question his colleagues at Hollingsworth Research Group. Determine whether the man had professional adversaries. If he was engaged in important work, it could attract covetous eyes. And assassins? Archie. Please." Wolfe sighed. "Your vocabulary insists on melodrama. Use discretion." "I always do," I said. "You do not," he corrected. He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't going to award him points for it. Hollingsworth Research Group, where genius meets bureaucracy. The Hollingsworth Research Building stood on East 48th like it wished it were a cathedral. Inside, it was more like a hospital for nervous scientists. White walls, gray floors, and people who looked like they spent more time with test tubes than sunlight. I flashed my card at the receptionist, who gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Doyle worked here," I said. "I'd like to speak with whoever supervised him." "That would be Dr. Lionel Bexley," she said. "Second floor, room 214. Dr. Bexley looked like a man whose hobbies included migraine cultivation. When I entered, he practically winced at the sight of me. "Dr. Bexley?" I asked. "Yes. Are you?" "Archie Goodwin, investigating Doyle's death." His shoulders slumped. "Terrible business. Just terrible. But the police told us it was a heart attack." "Maybe," I said. Maybe not. What sort of work did he do here? Bexley hesitated. Long enough to play a short card game. Research. Chemical processes. Industrial applications. That covers everything from cough syrup to mustard gas, I said. Narrow it down. He was studying catalytic compounds, Bexley said at last. Substances that react when exposed to small triggers, temperature, vibration, air exposure. That got my full attention. Catalytic compounds, huh? Any of them dangerous? Some, he admitted. But Doyle wasn't working on weapons. His research was theoretical. Did he have enemies here? Enemies? Bexley frowned. This is a laboratory, not a battlefield. You'd be surprised. I pressed on. Anyone resent him? Compete with him? Want his job? Bexley hesitated again. Dr. Wilma Creighton shared his workspace. She and Doyle disagreed often. Nothing violent, of course. Bring me to her. Dr. Creighton's office was an explosion of papers, coffee mugs, and molecular diagrams. She looked up when we entered, irritation already present like a welcome mat. Yes, she said. I'm Goodwin, I introduced. Investigating Doyle. Her irritation shifted, mellowed. Oh. Yes. Sam's death was shocking. He was brilliant. Difficult, but brilliant. Difficult how? He was secretive. Paranoid. He'd hide his notes, lock his drawers, mutter about someone sabotaging him. I told him he was being melodramatic. All scientists are melodramatic, I said. Some hide it behind math. She cracked a reluctant smile. True. Did you notice him acting odd last week? She nodded. Yes. He assumed someone was following him. He kept checking his briefcase like it was about to sprout legs. The day before his trip, he told me, if something happens to me, it won't be my heart. That quote slid into my brain and lit a neon sign. Why didn't you report that? I asked. Because Sam was always saying dramatic things. Also, he had filed a patent request last month, a new compound with possible industrial applications. He was convinced someone wanted to steal it. Someone here. She shrugged. Hollingsworth is competitive. Very competitive. As I left the building, my head was bubbling with more leads than a fishing tournament. Doyle had secrets, paranoia, a valuable discovery, and co-workers who had both opportunity and motive. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe renders judgment. By the time I stomped up the brownstone steps, it was late afternoon. The smell of Fritz's cooking drifted from the kitchen, and Wolfe was in the office, fingers steepled, gaze fixed on some internal universe where orchids and murder investigations coexisted in harmony. Well, he demanded. I delivered the highlights: catalytic compounds, paranoia, patent disputes, and Dr. Creighton's confession that Sam had predicted his own demise. Wolfe's eyebrows rose. A catalytic compound. Interesting. You think that's our reagent? I asked. I think, Wolfe said slowly, that our victim was indeed engaged in research that could incite avarice. And that he anticipated danger. And that the mechanism of death may relate directly to his work. Which means he wasn't just killed, I said. He was silenced. Wolfe glared. Archie. Until I have evidence, do not indulge in sensationalism. I leaned back and grinned. Sure. But you're thinking it too. He ignored that. We now have 3 sets of motives: professional rivalry, theft of intellectual property, and personal grievances. We must identify which among them warranted murder. And the suspects on the train? They remain suspects, Wolfe said. Some may be connected to his work, others may have used the train as a convenient environment. But the crucial fact is this: someone prepared a method to kill Doyle before he entered that compartment. Meaning the killer didn't have to be on the train at all. Wolfe nodded once. Yes. Which both widens and narrows our field. Sounds like cheating, I said. Crime frequently does. His gaze sharpened. You will return tomorrow to Hollingsworth. Acquire Doyle's personnel records, associates, and correspondences. Someone precipitated his death. We must identify the impetus. And what will you do while I'm gone? I asked. Think. I tipped my hat. Heavy work. Archie, he warned. Right. I'll behave. As I left the office, I glanced back. Wolfe sat motionless, his eyes half closed, fingers twitching slightly as if plucking invisible petals. That meant he was getting closer. Which meant the killer, whoever they were, should start sweating. And I had a feeling they already were. Chapter 5, The Suspects Converge. There's a particular expression Nero Wolfe gets when he's about to inconvenience the human race. It's subtle, just a tightening at the corner of his mouth and a gleam in his eyes that says, prepare for aggravation. I walked into the office that morning and saw exactly that expression. Wolfe was already seated in his throne-like chair, freshly fortified by Fritz's eggs and beer, and wearing the kind of smug serenity you usually find carved on statues of philosophers. That was my first warning. The second was the letter in front of him, opened and neatly squared with military precision. Archie, he said, in a tone that meant he had decided something I wasn't going to like, we must accelerate matters. Sure, I said. But breakfast comes first, and after yesterday's tour of chemical compounds, I need at least 2 cups of coffee. This is no time, Wolfe snapped, for frivolity. That meant no one in New York was currently allowed to be frivolous, under penalty of Wolfe's displeasure. I poured myself coffee anyway. He pointed at the letter. I have invited our 3 principal suspects, Mr. Brent the businessman, Mrs. Carlton the newlywed, and Professor Darrow, to this office at 4 o'clock. I nearly choked on my coffee. All 3. In the same room? With you? Voluntarily? Yes, he said. Though voluntarily is optimistic. They are coming because I phrased the invitations in a manner that implied refusal would be problematic. You threatened them, I translated. I stated facts, Wolfe corrected. And what if they all decide to sue us for harassment? I asked. Pfui. Wolfe waved a dismissive hand. They won't. Curiosity, apprehension, or guilt will drive them here. Or all 3, I added. This will be a circus. He scowled. It will be necessary. That much I couldn't argue with. When Wolfe calls a meeting of suspects, he doesn't do it to save time, he does it to stir the pot. And we had plenty of ingredients, contradictions, motives, bitter perfume, shaking hands, and a dead man with a secret he didn't live long enough to share. All right, I said. 4 o'clock. I'll keep the afternoon clear. No, Wolfe said. You will not. I need you at Hollingsworth before then. I sighed. What for now? Doyle's patent request, Wolfe said. I want the full documentation. If his discovery was valuable enough to incite murder, we must know its nature. You want me to charm the legal office? I asked. That is your sole talent, he said. I grinned. That hurts, sir. It was meant to, he replied. Hollingsworth research, a motive in ink. By the time I reached Hollingsworth, the sky was the color of steel wool and Manhattan traffic was at its surliest. Inside, I found Dr. Creighton elbow-deep in diagrams and Dr. Bexley elbow-deep in misery. Both looked up as I entered. Back again? Creighton asked. Sorry to ruin the ambience, I said. Wolfe wants Doyle's patent file. Bexley's eyes widened behind his glasses. We can't simply hand that over. You can if you want Wolfe off your doorstep, I countered. Otherwise he'll summon you personally for questioning. And he's in a mood today. That did the trick. Scientists fear many things, peer review, grant committees, fire, but nothing terrifies them like being trapped in a room with Wolfe when he has questions. 10 minutes later, I walked out with a folder thick enough to stun a burglar. It contained technical jargon, formulas, chemical diagrams, and a summary that explained precisely nothing to me. I'm fluent in many languages, English, sarcasm, and the occasional spoken threat, but chemical theory isn't one of them. I grabbed a cab back to the brownstone. Inside, Wolfe was in the plant room, as was his sacred custom from 9 to 11. The orchid scented the air with exotic fragrances, the temperature was warm enough for reptiles, and the man tending them looked like he belonged in a cooler climate and temperament. He glanced at the folder in my hand. Set it on my desk. I will review it. Yes, sir, I said. Anything else? No. Unless you insist on bothering me further. I didn't. At 4 o'clock, the wolves walked in. By 3:45 the office was prepared for battle, chairs aligned, notepad ready, Wolfe fortified with beer, and me fortified with the knowledge that someone in that room might have orchestrated a murder that fooled the police. At 3:55, Professor Darrow arrived, precisely on time, looking smug enough to qualify for his own weather pattern. He sat gracefully, crossed his legs, and folded his hands. At 3:59, Mrs. Carleton walked in, pale and trembling, a decorative hat perched on her curls. She clutched her purse like it contained her last shred of courage. At 4:07, fashionably late and sweating through his collar, Mr. Brent stumbled into the room with apologies dripping off him like grease. Wolfe surveyed them with the benevolent disdain of a king addressing peasants. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Sit." They sat. He folded his hands. "I will be direct. Each of you had opportunity to observe or interact with Mr. Samuel Doyle during his final journey. I require clarity." Brent started babbling instantly. "Listen, Mr. Wolfe, I barely noticed the man." "Quiet," Wolfe said. He didn't raise his voice, he simply hardened it, and Brent obeyed like a chastened terrier. Wolfe turned to Darrow. "Professor, you implied that Doyle was anxious about time. Elaborate." Darrow inclined his head. "He checked his watch frequently, yes. As if anticipating a scheduled event." That raised Mrs. Carleton's eyebrows. "Scheduled? What kind of event?" Darrow shrugged. "I could not say." Wolfe studied her next. "Mrs. Carleton, you claimed you left your berth briefly that night. Yet the porter reports seeing you in the corridor twice." Color rose in her cheeks. I didn't want to say. My husband is a jealous man. I stepped out for air. I didn't want anyone to assume something inappropriate." "Nonsense," Wolfe said bluntly. "If your husband's jealousy outweighs truth, he needs correction, not deception." She winced. Brent looked like he wished he were home counting money or ulcers. Wolfe turned his attention to Brent. "You, sir, were awake at unusual hours." "Why?" I'm a poor sleeper," he muttered. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "The rocking of the train doesn't help." "Did you smell anything unusual?" Wolfe asked. Brent blinked. "Smell? No. Well, maybe something sweet. But trains always smell strange." Wolfe leaned back. That tiny detail, the sweet smell, set Mrs. Carleton trembling. Darrow narrowed his eyes thoughtfully. I watched all three, Mrs. Carleton twisting her wedding ring, Brent wiping his brow with a trembling hand, Darrow looking a little too satisfied with his own cleverness. Psychological tension. We had enough to stretch from the brownstone to Albany. Wolfe steepled his fingers. That was code for, now we cook. You each reported fragments, he said. Inconsistencies. Observations that, combined, reveal a sequence of events you have all neglected to admit. Mrs. Carlton gasped. Brent made a sound like a man swallowing a stone. Darrow's eyebrow rose, skeptical but alert. Wolfe continued, a reagent was present in that compartment. Something that released a volatile substance. Something planted before Mr. Doyle even saw that birth. Brent choked. A poison? I did not say poison. Wolfe's tone sharpened. I said reagent. And it suggests the killer required no physical presence inside the compartment. Merely timing. Mrs. Carlton's trembling worsened. She looked ready to faint or confess something irrelevant. Darrow leaned forward. Mr. Wolfe, are you suggesting premeditated remote action? That someone planted a device? That is precisely what I am suggesting. Brent sputtered. But, that's impossible. Who would, how, why? Wolfe closed his eyes, shutting Brent out like an unwelcome draft. I will determine who and why soon enough. What concerns me now are your omissions. Omissions? Mrs. Carlton whispered. We told you everything. No, Wolfe said softly. You told me what you wished me to hear. The room fell silent. Even the street noise outside seemed to pause respectfully. Wolfe opened his eyes. I will speak to each of you privately. Archie will escort you out and call you back as needed. You will remain available. That was dismissal, and they felt it. Darrow rose with dignity. Mrs. Carlton rose with visible relief. Brent rose with difficulty and dread in equal parts. As they filed out, Wolfe let out a long breath. Archie, he said, one of them lied most egregiously. Only one? I asked. They all lied, he said. But one lied with purpose. Which one? He glared at me. Do not be obtuse. If I knew, I would not be irritated. I grinned. So we're making progress. His eyes narrowed. Archie. Bring me the patent records. I did. He flipped through the pages, lips tightening. This compound Doyle discovered is consequential. Highly valuable. Immensely. A motive? Oh, Archie, Wolfe said, motive is now the one thing we have in abundance. Outside, the city hummed, taxis screeched, and the sun began dipping behind buildings like it didn't want to see what happened next. Inside the brownstone, Wolfe had settled deeper into his chair. Which meant things were about to get interesting. And possibly dangerous. Chapter 6, The Train Without a Killer. One nice thing about working for Nero Wolfe, if you like your life complicated, is that he never settles for a normal murder. A clean shot in an alley. Too vulgar. A knife in the dark. Positively plebeian. No, we had to get the deluxe model, a man dead in a locked train compartment, with a smell that didn't belong and nobody there to have done it. A train without a killer. That was Wolfe's phrase, not mine. He unveiled it late the next morning, after 2 orchid hours, 1 monumental breakfast, and a long date with the patent file I'd bled out of Hollingsworth's legal department. He was in his chair, of course, occupying it the way a mountain occupies a valley. The windows were cracked just enough to let in the low growl of midtown traffic. Fritz had just delivered a fresh bottle of beer. I was at my desk, polishing my notes and my patience. Wolfe shut the folder with a soft thump. Archie, he said, this is, regrettably, murder. Regrettably? I asked. I thought you liked murder. Professionally, I mean. I tolerate it as a source of income, he said tartly. I do not like it. Especially not when it is ingenious. I perked up. So it was a mechanism? A device? He sighed. Doyle's research concerned catalytic compounds, substances activated by small stimuli. Heat. Friction. Vibration. The patent proposal suggests an industrial application, a coating that releases an active agent when subjected to a specific kind of motion. The motion of a train, I said. Possibly, he conceded. The point is, Doyle created a method for timed or conditional release. Someone applied that principle to his using his own work to kill him, I said. Neat. Do not admire it, Wolfe snapped. It is barbaric. And, he lifted a finger, it explains the anomalies. The odor, the lack of struggle, the locked door. The killer did not need to enter the compartment at the moment of death. The work was done beforehand. I sat back. So we're not looking for who killed him on the train. We're looking for who prepared the package. Yes, Wolfe said. This was a train without a killer. The agent was present, but its author was elsewhere. He swallowed some beer and let that hang in the air. Okay, I said. So we widen the field. Anyone who knew his work, knew he was traveling alone, and had access to his belongings becomes a suspect. Not anyone, Wolfe said. Someone with technical competence. And motive. And the ability to plan with precision. The missing timetable page, he tapped the folder, is particularly significant. Clara's copy, I remembered. Her brother's timetable with the overnight schedule page torn out. Yes. The timetable in his compartment was untouched, but the one he carried was mutilated. Why remove a page? Not to conceal the schedule from Doyle, he could ask any porter. No, the page was removed to be used, by someone who needed the exact times and distances of that journey. Like, say, to calibrate a device. I suggested. His eyes flicked open, mildly approving. You are not wholly insensate. Yes. I grinned. That makes me, what, 10% sensate now? 8, he said. He leaned back and closed his eyes. That meant he was thinking, not napping. You learn to tell the difference. Archie, he said at last. In the patent file, there is a marginal notation, a meeting requested by a man named Royce Markham. He is the executive liaison for Hollingsworth's primary industrial partner. His interest in Doyle's compound was emphatic. I saw the name, I said. Figured he was just another Pfui. Just another suit is often a greater menace than any thug. Markham requested a private demonstration. It was postponed when Doyle chose to travel to Washington instead. I want to know more about Mr. Markham. So I go ask him, I said, standing. Office or home? Office, Wolfe said. Such men prefer to posture amid chrome and glass. Discover his reaction to Doyle's death. And whether he ever studied timetables. That last part might sound odd, I pointed out. Use your ingenuity. It is, after all, why I keep you. I thought it was my charm, I said. He closed his eyes again. Go away. Royce Markham, or, How to Sweat in a Climate-Controlled Office. Markham's company, Allied Processors, had its logo slapped on a sleek slab of a building off Park Avenue, where the sidewalks were wider and the shoes shinier. The lobby was marble and metal and people who didn't look at you unless they had to. I rode up in an elevator that moved smoother than our train had and stepped into an office where the receptionist's smile was as warm as the decor, cool, tasteful, and about as human as a blueprint. Mr. Markham. I flashed the card. Archie Goodwin, representing Nero Wolfe. Her smile twitched. The name gets around. She called in, murmured, then nodded me toward a frosted glass door. Royce Markham stood by the window, looking down at Park Avenue like it owed him money. He was in his 40s, fit, flat-bellied, with the kind of suit that says you could buy the building and have change for lunch. He turned as I entered, sizing me up in a second. Mr. Goodwin, he said. This is unexpected. I get that a lot, I said. I'm looking into the death of Samuel Doyle. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed smooth. Tragic. Brilliant man. Hollingsworth informed us it was a heart attack. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. You tried to arrange a private meeting with... I try to arrange private meetings with everyone who might make my company money, Mr. Goodwin. That is my function. Doyle's compound would have made you a lot of money. His eyes slid to the window. Potentially. A controlled release coating has obvious applications. Controlled release, I repeated. Triggered by motion. Or vibration. Or time. He looked back at me. Little lines appeared at the corners of his mouth. You've been briefed. Let's say I've heard the sales pitch, I said. Did you ever get your demonstration? No, his tone cooled. He postponed. Went to Washington instead. I was displeased. Displeased enough to kill him. It came out before I could varnish it. Subtlety is overrated anyway. His stare hardened. That's an offensive question. Yeah, I said. Answer it anyway. No, he moved behind his desk, a safe place with polished wood between us. I don't kill men who annoy me. If I did, there'd be no one left to make money off. He tried a smile. It didn't land. All right, I said. Did you know which train he was taking? Which compartment? I knew he was traveling overnight, Markham said. We'd hoped to reschedule for his return. Doyle sent a note with his itinerary. He opened a drawer, shuffled, and came up with a sheet of paper. We keep everything. I glanced at it. It was a typed memo from Doyle, courteous and formal, listing his departure and return on the Northeastern Limited. Times. Dates. Car number. You keep timetables? I asked. We keep the data we need, he said. A shadow crossed my mind, the missing page from Clara's booklet, the intact one in the compartment, and this typed schedule in Markham's drawer, neat, precise, and very handy if you wanted to time anything to the train's motion. On my way out, I checked in with the building's security, on the pretext of admiring their system. A few questions later, I learned something Wolfe would like. 3 days before Doyle's trip, Markham had signed in a visitor, one Goran Lenk, an independent engineer, who'd come up with blueprints and left with a retainer. Engineers and blueprints are like thunderheads, they usually mean something is going to happen. The workshop in Queens. Queens at night has a different rhythm from Manhattan. Less gloss, more grit. The cars are dented, the neons tired, and the smells are sharper. I found Lenk's address in a directory, a squat brick building near a rail line, with a faded sign reading Lenk Mechanical Fabrication. The windows were dark, but there was light under the side door. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. The door finally opened a crack. A man peered out, late 50s, narrow face, metal-framed glasses, the kind of hands that look clean but have permanent grease under the nails. Yes. Goran Lenk? I asked. Archie Goodwin. Private investigation. I'd like to ask about some work you did for Mr. Markham. His eyes narrowed. That is confidential. Sure, I said. So is murder. We can trade. He started to close the door. I stuck my foot in. We had a brief, polite discussion about whether that was necessary. I won. Inside, the workshop smelled like metal and oil and old cigarettes. A lathe hummed quietly in the corner. On a bench lay a collection of small brass cylinders, no bigger than cigar tubes, some open to show intricate inner guts, springs, tiny valves, clockwork segments. I picked one up. It was light, but dense with implication. What are these? I asked. Prototypes, Lenk said stiffly. Precision dispensers. They release a drop of liquid after a timed interval. Or after vibration. I asked. He flinched. Just a twitch, but I've made a career out of watching twitches. That depends on how they're calibrated, For Markham. I pressed. What did he tell you they were for? Industrial lubrication, he said quickly. Too quickly. Machines that need oil at intervals. Sure, I said. Like a train compartment needs oil. I wandered a little, casual as you please. There was a crumpled timetable on a stool near the bench, Northeastern Limited, Washington to New York, with one line underlined in pencil. And on the floor beneath the workbench, a small empty bottle with a faint sweet scent when I uncapped it, like the ghost of the smell from Doyle's compartment. Lenk watched me, tight as a drumhead. Mr. Lenk, I said, I'd advise you not to lie to me. My employer is Nero Wolfe. He takes a dim view. He went paler. Everyone in this business knows Wolfe. Some people even sleep anyway. I design mechanisms, Lenk said, voice low. I do not ask what they are for. They pay, I build. That is all. You built something on this bench that kills, I said. Whether you knew it or not. He swallowed hard and said nothing. I didn't push further. Not yet. I left him to his metal and his conscience and headed back out into the Queen's night, where the rumble of a distant train rolled over the rooftops like a reminder. Wolfe connects the dots. It was late by the time I got back to the brownstone. The city had shifted to its nighttime personality, darker, louder, more secretive. The stoop was shadowed, the windows warm rectangles against the street. Inside, the air held the faint, complex scent of orchids from upstairs and savory leftovers from Fritz's dinner. Wolfe was in the office, naturally, a book in hand and a half-empty beer bottle on the desk. You're late, he said. Queens, I replied. Time moves slower past the river. I gave him the rundown, Markham, the typed itinerary, Lenk's workshop, the brass cylinders, the timetable with underlined entries, the sweet-smelling bottle. Wolfe listened without interrupting, his eyes steadily narrowing. When I finished, he let out a long breath. So, he said quietly. A mechanism exists. It can release a liquid after a timed interval, or when subjected to motion. A man with motive commissioned it. Another man with skill built it. And Doyle, who created the principle, died in a sealed compartment that smelled of a reagent. He shut his eyes. Elegant. Vile, but elegant. And Markham? I asked. He never boarded the train. Security logs show him in his office until almost midnight. Dinner afterward at the St. Regis, 8 people present. Signed checks, witnesses, the works. Of course, Wolfe murmured. Of course his alibi is perfect. He would not risk closeness to the scene if the train itself could carry his malice. So he's in the clear? I asked. Wolfe opened his eyes and gave me a look I'd seen before and never enjoyed. Archie, he said, no one who arranges for death by proxy is in the clear. We are now dealing with a man who can kill at a distance. He leaned back, settling deeper into the chair, as if preparing to grapple with an invisible opponent. This was a train without a killer, he repeated. But somewhere in this city, the killer is very much alive. And watching? I asked. And watching, Wolfe agreed. We have flushed him enough that he knows we are near. Now we must ensure he does not strike again, before I am ready to expose him. He reached for his beer. Outside, a taxi honked, a siren wailed in the distance, and above it all, I could have sworn I heard the thin, persistent echo of a train whistle. A man had found a way to kill without being there. Our job now was to make sure he had to show up in person to get. Chapter 7, The Orchid Room Revelation. If there is a more unlikely place for murder to be solved than Nero Wolfe's orchid rooms, I haven't found it. They're warm enough to bake bread and humid enough to drown a goldfish, and yet Wolfe insists they're ideal for thinking. Personally, I prefer a room where you don't need gills, but Wolfe's brain works best surrounded by exotic flowers and temperature settings that violate several health codes. It was late, nearly midnight, when he summoned me upstairs. That alone told me something was brewing. Wolfe doesn't voluntarily stay awake past 11 unless there's a national emergency, a personal insult, or a murder case that has begun to annoy him more than gravity. I found him at the far end of the middle room, standing, before a row of orchids. When Wolfe stands voluntarily, angels take notes. The air smelled like a perfume factory run by botanists. Vase-like cattleyas glowed under lamps, waxy phalaenopsis winked like smug butterflies, and Wolfe loomed among them like a disgruntled deity. "Archie," he rumbled without turning, "we are close." "Close to what?" I asked. "Heatstroke." He pivoted, slowly, like he didn't want to frighten any orchids, and fixed me with a stare that could sterilize surgical tools. "Do not be imbecilic. The pattern is almost complete." He pointed to a small bench near the misting system. "Sit." I sat. Wolfe remained standing, an event rarer than a solar eclipse witnessed by a penguin. He steepled his fingers. "Let us review." "Sir," I said, "we've reviewed more in this case than a publisher reviewing tax returns." "What's different now?" "The connections," he said. "They have aligned." He began pacing, or as close to pacing as a man his size can manage, between two rows of orchids. Samuel Doyle knew he was being followed. He distrusted his colleagues. He carried his timetable with a page removed. He boarded the train anxious about precise timing. All true. He feared theft of his patent. Yes. And he died at the exact point in the route when the train's vibration pattern matched the calibrated mechanism created in Lenk's workshop. I blinked. "We don't know that for sure." Wolfe's lip curled. "Of course we do, Archie. Lenk's prototypes are triggered by consistent repetition, rocking motion at specific intervals. Only 2 stretches of that railway line have the right oscillation pattern. Doyle died during one of them. You figured that out from the patent file? And from your report," he said. "Your brain is slow but not unusable." "Thank you, sir. I'll embroider that on a pillow." He pressed on. "Now consider the suspects who traveled with Doyle. Each has inconsistencies in their story, but none had opportunity to tamper with the compartment after Doyle entered it. And all 3 behaved like people with secrets, yet none of those secrets, as presented, explain the mechanism used. So they're red herrings?" I asked. "Not entirely," he said. "They each lied. But their lies mask embarrassment, not homicide." "Embarrassment?" "Yes. The businessman hides financial distress. The newlywed hides marital troubles. The professor hides intellectual vanity. Petty matters. Irrelevant to murder." I leaned forward. "Then the killer wasn't on the train." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "This was murder executed remotely. By someone who had motive, technical understanding, and access to Doyle's movements ahead of time. That gives us 2 names," I said. "Royce Markham and Goran Lenk." Wolfe shook his head. "Only one of them had motive. Lenk built the device." "Under instruction," Wolfe corrected. "And he is frightened. A guilty man does not fear discovery so much as control slipping from his grasp. Lenk fears something else." "Meaning Markham?" Wolfe closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, maybe absorbing sustenance from the orchids, and nodded. "Markham wanted Doyle's compound. Doyle refused. Markham was accustomed to compliance, so he coerced cooperation by less savory means." "Industrial espionage," I said. "The whole patent war routine." "Indeed." Doyle detected the theft attempt and grew wary. He concealed his work. He avoided Markham. And therefore, he became an obstacle. Which Markham solved with a little remote-operated homicide. Wolfe opened his eyes sharply. "Archie. Do not oversimplify. The truth requires precision. And proof. Proof we don't yet have, I admitted. Not yet, Wolfe said. But we will. He moved toward the far table and picked up a slip of paper. I hadn't seen it before. He held it out. This arrived by messenger an hour ago. I took it. The handwriting was jagged, hurried. Stop digging. You don't know what you're dealing with. If you continue, someone else will die. My spine tightened. You didn't tell me someone threatened you. Of course not, Wolfe said. You would have done something foolish. Foolish? Me? I protested. I'm the soul of discretion. Archie, he said, you once confronted an armed suspect with nothing but sarcasm. Worked, didn't it? Only because the suspect was too astonished to fire. I let that pass. So Markham's getting nervous. Yes, Wolfe said. Nervous enough to reveal his anxiety. Which is useful. Tension loosens tongues. And patience weakens alibis. I frowned. We still can't prove he planted the device. No, Wolfe said softly. But we can prove that he knew Doyle's itinerary intimately. That he requested blueprints for a mechanism timed to specific vibration patterns. That he met with Lenk the day before Doyle boarded the train. That he had financial incentive. Allied Processors stands to gain millions if Doyle's compound becomes theirs. And the missing timetable page? Wolfe lifted a finger. Markham needed it. To give Lenk the precise calibration times. I let out a low whistle. The room suddenly felt colder, despite the tropical humidity. Okay, I said. So what's the plan? We confront him. No, Wolfe's voice lowered. We lure him. Lure him? With what? With panic, Wolfe said calmly. We shall give him a situation he cannot ignore. One that forces him to act openly. That sounds dangerous. Everything worthwhile is dangerous, Wolfe said, settling into a chair. Fetch me the telephone directory. I raised an eyebrow. Sir, you getting off your feet twice in one night, is this the end times? Archie, he said, fetch the directory before I reconsider your employment. I got it and placed it beside him. He dialed a number, rare enough that I watched like it was a magic trick. After 3 rings, someone answered. Wolfe spoke briefly, formally, in a tone that suggested the recipient was not going to enjoy the rest of the week. When he hung up, I asked, who was that? A courier service, Wolfe said. We are sending Mr. Markham a message. What kind of message? The kind, Wolfe said, that informs him we have discovered the existence of a mechanism, and that the police will soon possess a full description, unless he wishes to prevent such a catastrophe. That'll spook him, I said. He'll run. Wolfe shook his head. No. He cannot afford to run. His empire, and reputation, are built upon certainty. If we shake that certainty, he must react. He cannot allow evidence to escape his control. So he'll come here, I concluded. Precisely. And in coming, he will betray everything I need to know. And if he brings a gun? Then, Wolfe said, you may finally earn your salary. The last detail. You said you were close, I reminded him. How close? He gazed at me, eyes half-lidded. So close, he murmured, that I require only one more fact. A small one. But critical. And when we have it. He lifted his head, and even the orchid seemed to lean in. The killer will have nowhere left to hide. I swallowed. And what's the missing fact? Wolfe's lips twitched in the faintest shadow of a smile. That, he said, is what you are going to fetch tomorrow morning. Fetch from where? He closed his eyes, signaling dismissal. Sleep, Archie. You will need your wits. Do I get a hint? No. Not even a letter. Out, he said, pointing at the door. And that was that. The orchids rustled faintly as I left, or maybe that was my imagination. Outside, the brownstone was quiet, the city murmuring beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, a man who killed at a distance was growing desperate. And when desperate men act, they make mistakes. We were counting on it. Chapter 8, The Final Confrontation. When Nero Wolfe orders me to fetch something, it usually means one of three things. A document he doesn't want to leave his chair for. A witness who doesn't want to leave their chair. Trouble. This time, it was option 3. He sent me out at dawn, a cruel hour for any decent human, but particularly for me after a night spent trying to guess what Wolfe had deduced in the orchid room. He wouldn't tell me the missing fact he needed, because Wolfe believes suspense builds character. My character doesn't need building, but he didn't ask for my opinion. My assignment: retrieve the passenger manifest for Car 3 from the Northeastern Limited for Doyle's return trip, the one he never lived to take. Why? I'd asked. Because it will show something, Wolfe said. What? Archie, he warned. So I fetched. The manifest was short, a handful of names, including a few familiar from our investigation, but one name leapt out like a guilty conscience. When I read it, my eyebrows tried to leave my forehead. I hurried back to the brownstone, took the stairs 2 at a time, and found Wolfe in his chair, fortified with shadowy, butter sauce, and a patience that was wearing thin even by his standards. I handed over the manifest. He took one look, grunted, and said, at last. Sir, I said, you could at least pretend to be surprised. I detest pretense, he replied. And we now possess enough to force a reckoning. Meaning that tonight, at 8, we will host our guests again. All of them. I blinked. All. Brent, Mrs. Carlton, Professor Darrow, he paused. And Mr. Markham. Markham won't come, I said. He's too smart. He will come, Wolfe said, because he is not nearly as smart as he believes. That was Wolfe at his confident worst, or best, depending on how you look at it. The room fills up. 8 o'clock arrived with the kind of tension you could smear on toast. The doorbell rang 3 times within 5 minutes. Brent arrived first, still sweating like he had personal beef with his endocrine system. Next came Mrs. Carlton, wide-eyed and trembling as if she expected the brownstone to develop fangs. Professor Darrow followed, cool and observant, taking in the room like a chessboard with unfamiliar pieces. They sat. Wolfe didn't speak. Not yet. Then the bell rang again. I opened the door to find Royce Markham standing there, tailored, polished, and very slightly pale. He stepped inside like a man entering a courtroom he built himself. Good evening, Mr. Goodwin, he said, voice smooth as an elevator operator. Evening, I replied. Your table is ready. I escorted him into the office. When he saw the others, he froze for a fraction of a second, small, but noticeable if you've spent your life noticing small things for a living. Wolfe gestured to the empty chair. Mr. Markham. Sit. When an 18-stone genius tells you to sit, you sit. Markham did. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, as if savoring the symmetry of the moment. Then he opened them and began. Wolfe begins the hunt. You are gathered, he said, because each of you contributed, knowingly or not, to the circumstances surrounding Samuel Doyle's death. Some of you lied. Some of you hid harmless secrets. One of you, however, committed murder. Mrs. Carlton gasped. Someone's chair creaked. Markham's jaw tightened just enough to register on the Richter scale. Wolfe continued, voice calm as cold steel. Samuel Doyle was killed by a mechanism triggered during the train's journey, a mechanism created using principles from his own catalytic research. The killer did not need to enter his compartment. The train's motion provided the final act. 3 faces registered shock. One did not. Professor Darrow leaned forward. A mechanical timed release system? Wolfe nodded. Precisely. Something small, concealed, awaiting the correct oscillation pattern. It explains the sweet chemical odor Mr. Goodwin detected, the lack of struggle, and the impossibility of a physical assailant. Brent stammered, but who would do something like that? Someone, Wolfe said, who had motive, access, technical assistance, and intimate knowledge of Doyle's exact itinerary. He turned to me. Archie. That was my cue. I retrieved the passenger manifest and handed it to Wolfe. He didn't look at it, he already knew what it said. This, he announced, holding it up, is the list of passengers registered for Doyle's return trip. On that list is the name of someone who vehemently denied knowing Doyle's plans. Someone who claimed to have no involvement in Doyle's movements beyond business. Someone who insisted they had no anticipation of Doyle's travel schedule. His voice sharpened like a knife being honed. That name, he said, is Royce Markham. The room erupted. Brent exhaled a sound like a squeaky door. Mrs. Carleton clasped her purse like it might shield her from bullets. Darrow's eyebrows climbed toward the ceiling. Markham didn't move. He sat very still, very straight, like a man who's just realized his parachute was packed by an enemy. Mr. Wolfe, he said slowly, there must be a mistake. I had no such reservation. Wolfe waved a hand. Nonsense. You booked it under an alias connected to your corporate account. A foolish error. You intended to meet Doyle on his return, presumably to coerce what you could not extort earlier. But by the time the train pulled in, Doyle was dead, and your alibi remained intact. Markham's composure cracked. This is outrageous. No, Wolfe said. It is arithmetic. You sought Doyle's research. You attempted to arrange a private meeting. You employed Mr. Lenk to build mechanisms based on vague descriptions. And you stole Doyle's original timetable to calibrate those mechanisms. The missing page, the one torn from his booklet, was removed by you. Markham opened his mouth, but Wolfe cut him off. And when Doyle died, you believed yourself safe. You were not. You sent a threat to stop us from uncovering your involvement, another error, as it confirmed you were watching our progress. Guilt makes men careless. Mrs. Carleton whispered, my God. Markham turned to her sharply. This is absurd. You can't possibly believe. Enough, Wolfe thundered. The room fell silent. Even the radiator stopped hissing. Wolfe rose, not fully, but enough to loom. The evidence forms a straight line, Mr. Markham. You positioned yourself to profit from Doyle's discovery. You orchestrated theft. When he resisted, you arranged a method of killing that removed you from the scene. But instruments crafted by another man, his voice softened, always bear their maker's fingerprints. Markham's lip curled. You have no proof. Wolfe looked at me. I reached into my coat pocket and placed the small brass prototype, the one Lenk had shown me, on Wolfe's desk. Markham's face drained of color. Where did you? I told you, Wolfe said, you are not as clever as you imagine. The collapse. At that moment, Markham lunged, not at Wolfe, which would have been suicidal, but toward the brass cylinder. A stupid move. Maybe the stupidest he'd made. I moved faster. I intercepted him, pinned his arm, twisted, and sent him face first into Wolfe's rug. It's a good rug. Thick enough to absorb confessions. Get off me. Markham snarled. You're lucky, I told him. Most killers don't get the chance to ruin Wolfe's rug. He sagged, defeated. The others watched in stunned silence. Wolfe delivers the verdict. Wolfe sank back into his chair. His eyes were tired but triumphant, the look of a man who has wrestled with logic and pinned it. You will call Inspector Kramer, he told me. Tell him we have concluded the matter of Samuel Doyle's death. Yes, sir. As for the rest of you, he told our audience, you may go. You are innocent of murder, but not, perhaps, of foolishness. Mrs. Carlton fled. Brent stumbled after her. Darrow paused long enough to say, "Brilliant, Mr. Wolfe," then departed with a thoughtful expression, leaving Markham on the floor and Wolfe glowering at him like a judge who'd run out of mercy. Peace restored, mostly. After Kramer and his boys hauled Markham away, I returned to the office. Wolfe was back in his chair, cradling a fresh bottle of beer. "You know," I said, dropping into my seat, "you're pretty good at this." He shut his eyes. "Archie. If you are going to be insufferable, do it quietly. I'm just saying, you cracked a murder where the killer never touched the victim. That," Wolfe said, "is the most distasteful part of it. Murder should require at least a modicum of courage. And Markham had none." "Precisely." He took a long drink. I stretched my legs. "So, another case solved. What now?" "Now," Wolfe said, "I return to my orchids. And I never, under any circumstances, board a train again." I saluted him. "Yes, sir." The city hummed outside. The brownstone was warm and safe. And the great Nero Wolfe, orchid lover, gourmet, immovable object, had once again reminded New York that even the cleverest killer can't outsmart a man who refuses to leave his chair. Unless you put him on a train. But that, I suspected, was a one-time event. And I wasn't going to push my luck.